we're going to now look at two problems that deal with similar information and a similar skill. And this is that we will know that a number below 0, when we cross that number on the number line, is going to be a negative number. It says here, the diagram here shows Bob's student standing on a cliff above the ocean. Here's Bob. Jim's student is scuba diving 60 feet below. And we've already written his name here, Jim. Feet below the ocean, I should say. If the ocean surface is at an elevation of 0 feet, what number represents the elevation of Jim's student? So, as we know, as it told us here, the ocean surface is at an elevation of 0 feet. And that is typically how we use this in real life. Elevation at sea level is considered 0. If you're up in the mountains, the numbers are going to be positive and they're going to increase as you go up. Now, when you are below the ocean surface, that depth is going to be considered a negative number because we crossed that point on the number line. So this problem is really simple. All you have to do is remember, we're below 0, we're below that point on the number line. Numbers are now negative. So what number represents the elevation of Jim's student? Negative 60 is what represents where he is at. He's negative 60 below. And so we wrote a negative sign here to indicate that. We will look at another problem. This problem has to do with very similar information, though it has a few additional steps. This one does not have a visual written, and so that's something that we're going to work on and create ourselves. It says here, Frank and Ted are swimming in a river. Frank gets out of the river and climbs on a 10-foot rock. Ted dives down underwater to 8 feet below the surface. Which of the following best describes their locations? So I'm going to come back here and look at the important information that it gave me. I know I have 2 points, where Frank is and where Ted is. They're swimming in a river. It says Frank gets out of the river and climbs on a 10-foot rock. 10-foot rock. Ted dives down underwater to 8 feet below the surface. So, it says here, A, they both started at 0, and now Frank is at negative 10, Ted is at negative 8. It's giving me these different choices to describe where they are. B, Frank is further away from 0 than Ted is. C, Frank is 10 feet away from Ted. D, they both started at 0, and now Ted is at negative 8, and Frank is at positive 10. To help me understand which of these choices is accurate, I'm going to draw my own image. So I know that we have Frank, we have a river, and actually I'm not going to draw it that way. I'm going to draw the surface of the river as a straight line across my page. So, I don't remember which name I used for this, but I'm going to start labeling them. So it says Frank gets out of the river and climbs on a 10-foot rock. We can even draw the rock here. So we know this measures 10 feet. This is the surface of the river, and it tells us, it actually doesn't tell us, but we know that the surface of the water is considered 0. And then below that number, we will find Ted. He dove down underwater to 8 feet below the surface. Now we know that when we go up, the numbers increase and are positive. When we go down, the numbers are negative and increase in value from 0, with a negative sign in front. Now it told us that Ted is underwater, so I didn't draw Ted still and label him. Because he is below 0, I know that this value is negative 8 and this is positive 10. So I need to find, and I forgot to write Frank's name, I need to find the answer that shows Frank at positive 10 and Ted at negative 8. Here it says they both started at 0, which is true. They were both swimming in the river. They were at the surface of the river. And now Frank is at negative 10, Ted is at negative 8. I know this isn't true because one of them is above the surface, one of them is below the surface. The next answer says Frank is further away from 0 than Ted is. Frank is 10 points away from 0, Ted is 8 points away from 0. It's important that we remember that the absolute value of these numbers, if I draw these lines around it, it means absolute value. We can forget about the sign and 8 is how many units away he is, and he is 10 units away from 0. So, this could be a possible best answer. It says Frank is further away from 0 than Ted is. Frank is 10 units away, Ted is 8 units away. So even though this is a negative number, the absolute value, the distance from the surface, is still 8. So this one could be our choice. Frank is 10 feet away from Ted. Now, this can be tricky. Frank is 10 feet away from the surface, but he is not 10 feet away from Ted. He is 10 and 8 units away from Fred, which means 18. He is not 10 feet away from Ted. They both started at 0, and now Ted is at -8, and Frank is at +10. So let's review. Ted is at -8, that is true, and Frank is at +10, that is true. This is the most descriptive, so I would say that this would be our best choice. While they are both accurate, this one gives me the most information and best describes their location. This is true, but it doesn't give me as much information, so I will cross this one off. And D would be our best choice because it best describes their locations, giving me the most information. When you see these problems, remember they are going to try and trick you. So remember that the absolute value of a number is how many units away it is. It doesn't matter if it's positive or negative for an absolute value. The units are the same. And then, when we are comparing the distance from one thing to another, we have to remember that this is a separate value and this is a separate value. So the total distance, here it said it was 10, the total distance is actually the sum of both with the absolute value. So 10 and 8 gives us 18. Remember these important facts and you'll be able to understand and tackle difficult problems like this. Now again, you have some of these in your packet. You can try a similar problem like this.